"She resisted arrest and tried to grab my weapon," the officer declared confidently in court. But when the black woman took the stand, she simply said, "Then, perhaps you should review my service record." Minutes later, the courtroom fell into stunned silence as her true identity was revealed. No one expected that this routine traffic stop would expose a truth far more powerful than any badge. In a modest North Carolina courthouse, 39-year-old Tasha Green sat composed yet vigilant. Dressed in a crisp white shirt and black slacks, she maintained perfect posture, the kind developed through years of discipline. Though her expression remained neutral, her eyes revealed a practiced watchfulness, scanning the room with the precision of someone accustomed to assessing threats. Across the aisle, Officer Edward Simmons, a white man in his late 40s with a decorated uniform and stern demeanor, testified that Tasha had been aggressive, non-compliant, and had reached for his weapon during a routine street check last Thursday evening. "I approached the subject after observing suspicious behavior," Simmons stated, his voice carrying the practiced authority of his 17 years on the force. "When I requested identification, she became immediately hostile. Her body language was threatening, and she refused direct orders multiple times." The judge, an older man with thinning gray hair, nodded along, occasionally glancing at Tasha with thinly veiled skepticism. Tasha's attorney, Malik Turner, appeared somewhat overwhelmed. Fresh out of law school with an ill-fitting suit, he shuffled through papers nervously, his objections repeatedly overruled. "Officer Simmons has an exemplary record," the prosecutor emphasized. "He's received commendations for bravery and community service. Why would such a respected officer fabricate these serious allegations?" Throughout this character assassination, Tasha remained eerily still. Not a flinch, not a sigh, just measured breathing and unwavering focus. Those closest to her might have noticed her hands, steady as stone, folded neatly on the table before her. The spectators whispered among themselves. Some cast judgmental glances her way, having already decided her guilt based on nothing more than appearance and accusation. A middle-aged woman in the back row muttered something about troublemakers always claiming innocence. Turner awkwardly approached the bench, requesting permission to present evidence that might contradict the officer's account. The judge, looking impatient, granted it with visible reluctance. "The defense calls Tasha Green to the stand," Turner announced, his voice cracking slightly. As Tasha rose from her seat, the room grew quieter. She moved with deliberate grace, each step measured and confident. She took the oath without breaking eye contact with the bailiff, her voice clear and unwavering. Under questioning from her attorney, Tasha recounted her version of events in a calm, methodical manner. "I was standing on the sidewalk checking my phone for directions when Officer Simmons approached and immediately demanded identification. When I politely asked what law I had broken, he became agitated and aggressive." Turner asked, "Did you at any point resist or become confrontational?" "No," Tasha replied. "I simply asked for clarification." In response, Officer Simmons grabbed my arm without warning and attempted to cuff me. I instinctively stabilized my stance. A reflex, nothing more. The prosecutor jumped up. "Objection! The defendant is characterizing her actions in favorable terms without evidence." "Your Honor," Turner interjected with newfound confidence, "we do have evidence." The judge raised an eyebrow. "Proceed." Turner asked, "Ms. Green, do you have any proof of your account?" Tasha allowed herself the slightest smile. "Yes, I do." She turned to face Officer Simmons directly. "What you didn't realize that day is that not everyone you harass is just an ordinary citizen." Turner approached the bench with a flash drive. "Your Honor, We'd like to present video evidence captured by a dashboard camera from a vehicle parked across the street. The courtroom screen flickered to life. The footage, though slightly grainy, clearly showed Tasha standing calmly on the sidewalk. Officer Simmons approached aggressively, his body language confrontational from the start. When Tasha asked a question, he immediately escalated, grabbing her arm roughly. Most damning of all, his words were clearly audible. "Women like you need to learn to follow orders without question." Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Officer Simmons shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his confident demeanor crumbling. The judge's expression hardened. The video continued, showing Tasha maintaining her balance without any aggressive movement toward the officer. Not once did her hands move anywhere near his weapon. "As you can see," Turner said, gaining confidence with each word, "my client never resisted, never threatened, and certainly never reached for Officer Simmons's weapon." The prosecutor frantically whispered to Simmons, whose face had drained of color. Turner continued, "Furthermore, we have statements from 2 witnesses who corroborate that Officer Simmons approached my client without provocation and escalated the situation unnecessarily." An elderly man in the 3rd row nodded vigorously. A younger woman nearby dabbed at her eyes. "Your Honor," Turner said, "this case represents a troubling pattern. We've submitted documentation showing that Officer Simmons has had 7 complaints filed against him in the past 3 years, predominantly against people of color. 6 of these complaints were dismissed without investigation." The judge frowned deeply, reviewing the documents handed to him. Tasha remained composed, her gaze now fixed on Officer Simmons. Not with anger, but with something more unsettling, the look of someone who had faced far greater dangers and remained standing. "Ms. Green," Turner asked, "would you please tell the court a bit more about yourself?" Tasha nodded. "I've spent my adult life in service to this country. I've faced situations where split-second decisions meant life or death. I understand protocol, chain of command, and appropriate use of force. What happened that day was none of these things. It was intimidation, plain and simple. If you believe dignity should never be silenced, comment, truth matters." Logically, Turner approached the bench with a sealed folder bearing official government markings. "Your Honor, with the court's permission, I'd like to submit Ms. Green's service record into evidence." The judge, now visibly intrigued, nodded his approval. Tasha stood up, slowly unfastening her jacket button to reveal a small insignia pin on her lapel that few civilians would recognize, but military personnel would instantly respect. "I am Lieutenant Commander Tasha Green, retired U.S. Navy SEAL," she stated, her voice resonating through the hushed courtroom. "I served for 20 years, including 4 classified operations in the Middle East, 2 in North Africa, and numerous counterterrorism missions that I am not at liberty to discuss." The courtroom erupted in gasps and whispers. Officer Simmons's face cycled through expressions of disbelief, embarrassment, and growing horror. "During my service," Tasha continued, "I commanded elite teams in combat situations where actual threats were present, not imagined ones on peaceful American streets. I've been trained to assess danger, to de-escalate volatile situations, and to recognize genuine threats. What I experienced that day was not law enforcement, it was harassment." The judge examined her service record, his eyebrows rising higher with each page he turned. "Ms. Green has received the Bronze Star with Valor, the Purple Heart, and numerous commendations for courage under fire," Turner explained. "She was one of the first women to complete SEAL training after combat roles were open to female service members, and she ranked in the top percentile of her class." Turner pressed further. Would someone with this background, this training, and this discipline attempt to grab an officer's weapon during a routine stop? Or is it more likely that Officer Simmons, with his documented history of complaints, exaggerated and falsified his report? The prosecutor, seeing the case crumbling before him, attempted damage control. Your Honor, Ms. Green's military service, while commendable, doesn't exempt her from following police instructions. Tasha addressed this directly. I understand the chain of command better than most. What I don't understand is why being a black woman on a public sidewalk warranted police intervention in the first place. She turned toward Officer Simmons. And this man, who sought to use his power to intimidate a woman of color, has now lied under oath. Today, I'm not defending my country. I'm defending myself and every citizen who has been profiled, harassed, or falsely accused. The courtroom, previously divided, now seemed united in support of Tasha. Even those who had cast doubtful glances earlier watched with newfound respect. Several veterans in attendance sat taller, recognizing one of their own. The verdict came swiftly. Not guilty on all charges. The judge went further, recommending an investigation into Officer Simmons for perjury and abuse of authority. This court cannot and will not tolerate false testimony from those sworn to uphold the law, he declared, his voice carrying the weight of 20 years on the bench. Furthermore, he continued, looking directly at Simmons, I am recommending a departmental review of all prior complaints against Officer Simmons. Justice delayed is justice denied, but it is never too late to right systemic wrongs. The police chief, who had slipped into the back of the courtroom halfway through proceedings, nodded grimly. His department would face difficult questions in the coming days. Outside the courthouse, reporters gathered as Tasha emerged, flanked by Turner and several supporters. The afternoon sunlight cast her figure in sharp relief against the classical columns of the building. Lieutenant Commander Green, how do you feel about the verdict? A journalist called out. Tasha adjusted her jacket, the small insignia catching the sunlight. I didn't seek publicity today. What I sought was accountability. This isn't about me. It's about ensuring our justice system works for everyone, regardless of race, gender, or background. Will you be filing a civil suit? Another reporter asked. My focus isn't on retribution, she replied. My focus is on reform. I've contacted police leadership about developing training programs to address bias and de-escalation techniques. A young black girl pushed through the crowd, timidly approaching Tasha. Ma'am, I want to be like you when I grow up, she said quietly. Tasha knelt to meet the girl's eyes. Be brave, be honest, and stand tall, even when it's difficult, especially when it's difficult. As cameras flashed around her, Tasha remained composed, the same steadiness she'd shown in combat zones now serving her in this civilian battlefield. She departed the courthouse steps unescorted, head high. A woman who had faced down both enemy fire and systemic injustice, and remained standing through both. Tasha Green didn't fight for medals or recognition. She fought to remind the world that no one, not even those with badges, has the right to diminish another human being based on prejudice. We live in a society that claims freedom for all, but if that freedom isn't equally distributed, it isn't freedom at all. The next time you witness injustice, remember, sometimes justice begins with a simple question. Why? And sometimes, the most powerful weapon against oppression isn't force. It's truth spoken with dignity by those brave enough to stand their ground.